After nearly 40 years of success and growth, Bellwether Housing is the Pacific Northwest's largest nonprofit affordable housing provider. But how did it all start? In the late 1970s, Seattle was coming out of the economic nosedive dubbed the Boeing Bust, and business leaders were looking for a way to revive their city. Virginia Anderson, one of the first women of the Seattle Downtown Association Board of Directors, was one of those leaders.
I was invited to join the board of Downtown Seattle Association in 1979, I believe, and then we started this comprehensive planning process for downtown, and I was asked to chair the housing committee of that. Following that decade of loss, and fear about, is the city going to survive? We come to a time of redefining and having to go, whoa, what does it mean to be a successful city? Diversification of the economy was huge. The chamber was taking a big lead in that. We, the Downtown Seattle Association, were saying, what would a successful downtown look like as we go forward?
The committee began to research how to go about creating a modern city. They looked at different cities like New York and Chicago to determine what role housing would play in the revitalization of downtown Seattle.
And so our committee was unraveling all these urban design issues and economic issues and saying, what kind of downtown do we want to be living in? How do we build an urban core? All of those were on the table because we'd had a decade of destruction of the economy that gave us an opportunity.
The committee met for months and months to study and discuss, coming up with recommendations centered around the need for affordable housing downtown. One recommendation was to create a nonprofit private organization backed by the DSA to start the development of affordable housing.
I asked for a vote and said there is nothing the committee's going to do differently. We need to vote up or we need to vote down, but this is the recommendation of the committee. And at that point, in a very rare, if not unheard of, divided vote, they approved going forward with the whole committee plan, which included the creation of Seattle Housing Resources Group that then became Bellwether.
The Seattle Housing Resources Group, or SHRUG as it was affectionately called, was born. In order to create this new nonprofit, they were going to need the funding to do so. They developed a budget and decided they would need $250,000 a year for 3 years. The group raised the money, but for the first 2 years, things were in turmoil.
The person who was secretary went on vacation, and I was asked to sit at her desk. And I got to look at the checkbook, and I noticed that they didn't have hardly any cash in the bank, but that they had $60,000 coming due very shortly. I was like, interesting. How are we going to get out of this? And from there, I got very involved.
Nancy Smith joined SHRUG in 1982 as its second executive director.
So we had to figure out how to take some of those things that were real challenges and either decide not to do them, which in some cases we did, or bring them to fruition. We shared offices with the Downtown Seattle Association. I had a desk in that office, and they had another desk, and as I hired a couple of people, they both used the same desk. So it was a very minimum organization.
I was chairing the board at that time, and we had not produced a unit of housing, and we knew it was make it or break it. And 908 Jefferson was our first ever building. We needed to create something by the end of the 3 years where the business community could kick the tires, could come see it, walk through, know what could actually happen and that we could produce. And that enabled us to go for the next 3 years of funding.
With Nancy Smith's leadership, the board and a community committed to making this work, the 908 Jefferson Rehabilitation Project was completed in 1982 with 26 units. And this was the first of many projects.
I worry sometimes on affordable housing that we want to solve problems in our world and be done with them and put them away. And it really is the work of humanity to just keep working on this. And Bellwether Housing has committed itself for 40 years.
We brought a lot of commitment to doing the affordable housing. We brought persistence, we were resourceful, we were nimble, and we cared deeply.
"40 years of smiling faces, 40 years of creative partnerships, 40 years of innovation and getting it done."
It's 40 years of leadership within the affordable housing community in Seattle.
Bellwether just keeps doing its work year in, year out, adjusting to funding changes, adjusting to priority changes. They keep doing the work. We will always have families who need housing that they can afford to create stability for their families, for themselves, for their jobs, to move the society forward.